Hello everyone, this is Edward Talisi coming to you from Fitch Learning. Welcome to our session today where we're going to talk about some last minute top 10 tips for preparing for the CFA exam. I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their busy schedules today to join us. I think if you have questions, you have the ability to write some questions in. I'll be able to see them on a monitor here. Hopefully we'll get to all the questions. So please, if you feel like I'm not covering something that you're interested in, take the time to write in the question, and I promise you I will do my best to answer all the questions. Like I said, my name is Edward Talisi. I am a full-time instructor here at Fitch Learning. I do CFA preparation and instruction for for all levels, Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3. I do both online sessions, which are similar to the webcast that we're doing today, and I do live instruction sessions as well. I am a charter holder. I obtained my charter whilst I was working in London a few years ago. I'm also a certified public accountant, and I have 25 years of investment management experience in the financial industry. So today, you have taken the time to join us here to understand and to get some last-minute top tips for the CFA exam. If you have elected to join us today, that to me indicates that you're serious about obtaining the charter. I will say that from my own perspective, the charter is extremely valuable. For my own career, it was enormously valuable. It particularly helped me understand client requirements and client approaches to investing large pools of money. When I took this exam, I think it was a very prestigious qualification to have. Obviously, it's still a very prestigious qualification to have, but I think it's even moved on from years earlier where it was a nice to have, and I think for lots of financial industry professionals, it's almost to a point where it's an almost must to have to move ahead in your career. So like anything that is prestigious, like anything that has value, it's going to require a lot of work, a lot of hard work and diligent work to get through this and to pass all 3 levels of exam. But I'm confident if you work hard and you allow us here at Fitch Learning to work hard as well and work alongside with you, we're very confident that you will be well prepared to pass all 3 levels of the CFA exam. So let's jump into today's presentation and see what some of our top 10 tips are for passing the exam. What we're going to do is cover a couple of different items. One is talking about the calculator. You are allowed to bring in either a Hewlett-Packard or a Texas Instrument calculator into the exam. I encourage you to make sure that my understanding of the calculator program is up to date, so I'm pretty sure both the HPs and the TIs are allowed, but please check with the Institute. So if we are allowed a calculator, it's extremely important for us to know how to use the calculator and to use it quickly and efficiently. So we'll go a little on the calculator side. We're going to talk a little bit about the strategy for approaching the exam. We'll talk a little bit about some of the crucial formula. I think this is very important because there are potentially many, many formulas that you have to memorize in order to be successful on the exam, but it really comes down to a handful of formulas that you need to memorize. Okay, we'll go through some of those. We'll do some tips on preparing for the exam to avoid unnecessary stress for the exam. I understand that different people have different studying styles. My own study style was to spread out exam preparation over a long period of time. For me, that worked, and it definitely reduced stress on myself, and it reduced stress on my family. So I would encourage you, if you have the time and you have the bandwidth to extend the study preparation over a long period of time, it should reduce stress. However, I recognize that some students are better at late preparation and sort of cramming at the end. I'm not here to tell you what is the best approach to you. I'm telling you what worked for me. What worked for me was spreading it out over a long period of time. To me, the absolute most critical aspect of this exam, particularly at Level 1, is to do practice of questions. Right? The exam consists of 240 individual multiple choice questions at Level 1. This is all about scoring well on multiple choice questions. So in order to pass the exam, we have to practice a large number of questions to get ready for the exam. I absolutely encourage students to read the material, to read Fitch's material, to read the CFA Institute's material in order to prepare for the questions that you're going to face on the exam. But it's absolutely critical that you get yourselves in the position where you are comfortable answering 240 questions over a 6-hour period split into 2 sessions of each hour. The Fitch portal that is available to students of Fitch Learning has a large number of very difficult questions that will absolutely get you in a position where that you feel on exam day you will pass the exam comfortably. So let's just review the paper that are required. Talking about level 1 here, obviously level 2 is similar to level 1, and level 3 is a little more different, excuse me. So for level 1 and level 2, let's focus on level 1. There are 2 papers. There's a morning session and an afternoon session. Each topic can be covered in both the morning and in the afternoon session. So that means if you see questions on ethics in the morning, it means that you can see questions in the afternoon as well on the same topic. Doesn't mean that you necessarily will, but you can. Similarly, if you see questions on quantitative methods in the morning session, it could mean that you will see them again in the afternoon session as well. So just because you see a topic in the morning doesn't mean you're free from that topic in the afternoon session. The exam is 6 hours in total. Is a 3-hour morning session followed by a lunch break, and then you come back in the afternoon session for another 3-hour session. So there's 6 hours in total. In total, there are 240 multiple choice questions, 120 on each paper, so 120 in the morning session and another 120 in the afternoon session. If you do the math, it's going to work out that you have approximately 90 seconds for each question. It may seem like a lot of time to you, and for some questions it will clearly be more than enough time to answer a question, but for other questions, 90 seconds may seem like too little. We encourage you, since all questions are equally weighted, is to use your prime appropriately and to spend on average 90 seconds per question. All questions at level 1 are multiple choice. So you have choices A, B, and C. There is no negative marking here. So that clearly means that it's in your interest to guess on a question that you really don't feel comfortable answering. Do not leave questions blank. Okay? Obviously, we got at least a 1/3 probability of guessing right on each question. So make sure that you complete all answers before submitting your paper. Each question is a standalone, right? They do not necessarily follow on from other questions. Some exams that you may have countered in undergraduate, graduate school, or on the GMATs, exams like that have follow-on questions. Here on the CFA exam, each question is a standalone question. It may have subparts. Each question may have subparts, but that question will not come up later in the exam once you complete it. So that's the format. Now we're going to go through some of the last-minute tips on the calculator. We're going to go through some last-minute tips for passing level 1. Okay, the calculator is key. I am an HP person, so I prefer to use the HP 12C. Lots of other people prefer to use the TI calculator. It's up to you. What I encourage you to do is you absolutely, positively have to be comfortable with the calculator's functions. Both the HP and the TI have a lot of shortcuts that will cut down on the number of manual calculations that you need to do. So you should be absolutely certain where to find the certain functions that you are going to need on both the HP or the TI, depending on your choice. The other tip that I have about calculators is if you find yourself during the exam entering multiple keystrokes, say more than 10 or 15 keystrokes, you're probably going down the wrong route. Most of the questions are on the exam, particularly at level 1, are designed where the calculation should be quick and easy. Right? Now, that's not to say there may be one question that does require a larger number of keystrokes, but on average, the keystrokes should be at a minimum. So if you're finding yourself where you're storing more than 1 or 2 variables for later calculations, you may be headed down the wrong road. I also believe that a good portion of the calculations that are required on the CFA exam can be done in your head. So I would encourage you, if you feel comfortable, I approach the exam this way, before jumping onto your calculator, try and estimate or ballpark the answer, just to see if the calculator answer is aligned with what your expectation is. Okay? On the TI calculator, Fitch has a very good resource. You could find it online. You could go to the video here and it will walk you through some of the most critical TI functions. These functions in the HP are the same, they just may be called something different. But it's clearly important to know how to do time value of money calculations, interest rate conversions, statistical calculations, capital budgeting calculations such as net present value and internal rate of return. To do some amortization, that may come up when you have depreciation in accounting or amortization of intangible assets, break-even rates as well. There may be other functions that you find personally very, very useful. I would encourage you to understand E on your calculator and ln, exponential functions and the inverse of an exponential function. It comes in very, very handy for when you have to do continuous compounding examples. Okay? Please go to the Fitch website, check out the video that will give you a very rigorous introduction on how to maximize your time and minimize your effort when you need to do these calculations. Okay? Second tip, time management and question practice is actually absolutely crucial. Now, what worked for me may not work for you. In preparation for level 1, right, what I think you need to do is over the course of your study period. Now, it depends how long you have a study period for. So let's say you intend to study for the December exam in the beginning of the summer of 2017. So let's say you will have July, August, September, October, and November. 6 months to prepare for the CFA Level 1 exam in December. So if you have 6 months, I would encourage everyone to do between 20 and 50 questions per day, each and every day. The Fitch portal has an enormous number of very, very challenging questions. If you do 20 to 50 questions per day over a 6-month period, you will have done an enormous amount of questions and have seen an enormous amount of variations on similar questions. So when you walk into the exam, you will feel extremely confident to be able to pass the exam. Remember, this is all about practicing questions. The other thing that I would encourage you, what worked for me, is when I was doing questions, say like 20 to 50 a day, and it really depends on how you spread out your study period, I encourage you to to test all topics each and every time you practice exam questions. So what I would say is I do not think it's optimal to say, okay, today I'm going to do 20 questions on ethics. Tomorrow I'm going to do 20 questions on portfolio management. I think it's best that if you let the test bank randomly select questions across the topics tested so that each and every time you sit down and do questions, you could face all of the topics that are tested. That is more similar to what is going to happen on the exam day. Now, that's what's worked for me. That doesn't necessarily mean it will work for you as well. But the key point is, regardless of what you designate your study period, I think a 6-month study period is optimal, because then you have plenty of time each day, and then you don't have to cram at the end. But I understand some people do like to cram. But whatever period you elect to do, you need to do lots and lots of questions. What worked for me is spreading out those questions across topics. That may work for you, or you may feel better served by concentrating on specific topic areas. Clearly, you want to work on areas that you feel like you need to improve. At level 1, where lots of candidates feel like they need to improve, it depends on their undergraduate degrees, is on the accounting section. Okay? As we'll see a little later, the accounting section is a very large component of level 1. Okay, so if you studied accounting in undergrad or graduate school, you may feel comfortable with the topic. However, a lot of people that have not studied accounting find this area particularly challenging. So of course, when you're studying and doing practice questions, I would focus a little more on the accounting. Similarly, if you feel comfortable on the quantitative section, because you're very good with numbers and you have a mathematical background, and you're good at memorizing formulas, maybe you could underweight that in your study area. The key point is, it's up to you to create the plan. We are here to help you. We are here to provide very challenging questions, and if you get stuck, we're available to help answer those questions. But it's really up to you to start thinking about what my study period is going to be, or the length of the study period, and how many questions per day I'm going to challenge. On the exam day, as I mentioned earlier, remember, watch your time. Okay? You have 3 hours in the morning, you have 3 hours in the afternoon. Each session is 120 multiple choice questions. Again, do the math. It says that you have about 90 seconds per question. Use your time efficiently. Each question is equally weighted. Do not get bogged down on individual questions. Move on. Okay? Question practice is obviously crucial, but please bear the following in mind. Use the right allocation of time, as I've mentioned. Always read the requirement first. I would say when I was first studying for the exam, this is where I made my most amount of mistakes in the early part of my study program. I would read the question too quickly, right? Because the CFA Institute absolutely knows that you're going to feel some pressure on exam day. So sometimes you need to look for critical words in the exam questions, such as not, or always, or never, right? So make sure that you are looking at the exam question very carefully. And when you select your answer, go back and make sure that it's answered the question that was asked. Okay, because sometimes people go too quick and don't look at some of the critical words that will be in the question. I would go through the questions, I'd have a pencil in my hand, and I would circle the key words like least, most, average, things like that. Key words in the question that will help you get to the right answer. Obviously, do not get bogged down, right? Each question is worth the same. Okay, this is a typical question, right? If you're not a bond person, right? I'm a bond person. I've been in the bond market my whole career, and questions like this, I feel could be challenging, particularly under a stress situation, right? But the key point to this is, if you know how to use your TI, if you know how to use your HP 12C, this question gets much, much easier. If we go back, this function here on your calculator, interest rate conversions, will allow you to answer this question simply, quickly, and efficiently, and allow you to move on to more challenging questions. Okay? Even if you don't understand the theory of what they're trying to do here, you could follow and memorize the steps that are required on your TI calculator or your HP calculator to solve this. This is a very typical question that you would find at level 1, perhaps maybe either in the quantitative section or in the bond section, right? They're giving you a 6-year bond, right? They want you, basically, if I was reading the question, I would circle 6-year, I would circle semi, 4% semi is key here. The price may or may not be key. The fact that it matures at par should always be apparent, but maybe it doesn't. And then they're saying the yield to maturity quoted on a semi-annual basis is 340. All this information is given to you. And they're asking you a question that you as a trader have been simply asked to convert this to from semi-annual bond basis to a monthly periodicity. Okay, so your TI calculator may help. Why may it be interesting to calculate it to a monthly periodicity? Well, there may be some mortgage-backed securities, right, because they pay down monthly, that are quoted with monthly conventions rather than semi-annual bond conventions. Okay, so this is a very, very typical question that you should feel comfortable using your TI or your HP calculator. Now here is another type of question that you will get. This will absolutely be in the accounting section. I think the accounting, excuse me, is a little tricky. Excuse me, one quick second. For those of you in the United States, you'll be familiar with GAAP, U.S. generally accepted accounting standards. In Europe and parts of Asia, they use international financial reporting standards. There is a giant project going on between U.S. accountants and international accountants to see convergence between both sets of standards. However, as of today, there is some discrepancy, or there's some latitude and choices on how to account for certain types of cash flows on the statement of cash flows between U.S. GAAP and international reporting statements. So when you look at a question like this, right, they are essentially expecting you to understand the statement of cash flows. Okay, it's something that in Fitch Learning we will spend a lot of time in the accounting section understanding the statement of cash flows. And you will understand that in the statement of cash flows you have 3 choices on where to put cash inflows and outflows on this statement. It could be in operating cash flows, it could be in financing cash flows, and it could be in investing cash flows. And the choices of where to assign these types of cash flows between US GAAP and international reporting standards can and are different, at least for the moment. You will be expected to know how to treat it under GAAP and how to treat it under international financial reporting standard. A very, very typical accounting question that you may face for level 1. Okay, similar question again on the cash flow statement. This is going to be a little more detailed. They're asking you under US GAAP. US GAAP, so they're expecting you to know both US GAAP and IFRS. Now for level 1, there are not a huge number of areas where they differ. They differ mostly, at least for our purposes on level 1, on the cash flow statement. So they're asking us from cash flows from a financing standpoint. So we have to know, is dividends paid a financing cash flow? Well, if you don't know, you would say, well, it's an operating or maybe financing. So we would have to think about that. Common stock issued, well, that absolutely sounds like a financing cash flow. Equipment purchase, probably not. That sounds like an investment cash flow. Bonds issued, that absolutely sounds like a financing cash flow. So answering this question correctly will really come down to your ability to understand how dividends paid affects the cash flow statement. Okay, very, very typical. Cash flow statement, again, is something that we spend a lot of time on at Fitch Learning. Okay, last minute tips. Tip number 3, make sure you know how a topic will be tested. Okay, the topic is tested here. On level 1, it is all multiple choice questions. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. The key point here is to read the learning outcome statements, because the learning outcome statements will tell you where you need to calculate, where you need to compare, where you need to be able to understand the description or to analyze. Okay, this is absolutely the key. There are some advanced quantitative concepts that are included in Level 1, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to ask you to use those concepts to calculate a variable or a parameter. They may just ask you to compare it to a different type of calculation. So make sure when you're going through the learning outcome statements, underline the action verb, right? If it says to calculate in this particular learning outcome statement, then spend your time learning the calculations. If it doesn't say calculate, spend your time understanding what the calculation does, what information it provides, and most importantly, how you could use it in your analysis of financial information. Okay, the learning outcome statements provide an enormous amount of useful information to ensure that you're going down the right path. Okay, topic number 4. Don't learn or don't waste your time on formula that will not be tested. Again, there is lots of advanced concepts in Level 1 that are not necessarily going to be tested in a formula context. They may already give you the result of the calculation and ask you how to analyze the result rather than to calculate the result. Now that may be different in Level 2 and in Level 3, but for purposes of Level 1, when you're going through the learning outcome statements, if you see calculate, that means calculate. If you don't see calculate, that means that the metric under review or the particular area of interest, you will be more asked to analyze its impact and what it really means rather than to calculate it. Okay, in my opinion, and other people will have other opinions, what you need to do is you need to have your own formula sheet, right? And I think over time, as you're studying, you will come up with your own formula sheet. Now, obviously, the internet, you could go to the internet and ask for CFA formula sheet. Fitch provides them. Other providers have them as well. But ultimately, I encourage you to do your own formula sheet, because I look at formulas maybe slightly different than you look at formulas, that other people look at formulas. So have your own little formula cheat sheet, right? How I look at formulas could be very, very different. The key formulas that I think you need to know, there could be others, but for my purposes for Level 1, I think portfolio standard deviation, standard error of the mean, Sharpe trainer ratios and Jensen's alpha, calculating beta correlation coefficient and covariance, bond duration, both Macaulay and modified, and convexity approximations. Please remember that these are not absolute answers, they're approximations. Need to understand the capital asset pricing model. Need to understand dividend discount models and weighted average cost of capital. Accounting ratios like profitability ratios, turnover and activity ratios, and the DuPont analysis, which is really a deconstruction of ROE. Most of the analysis, statistical analysis of the moments of a population, like the mean, the variance, the standard deviation, right? These are easily handled in the TI or in the HP. Obviously, it's useful if you know what those formulas are, but it's not necessarily required. For Level 1, we don't necessarily go beyond the first and second moments of a distribution. Okay, that's the first moment, variance is the second moment. Skewness and kurtosis are the third and fourth moments, but you're not necessarily asked to calculate them, right? Some other formulas that may be in here, if you're not great at probability, right? There will absolutely be 3 or 4 questions on probability. Maybe you want to go back and review some of the probability concepts and have them on your formula sheet. Okay, tip number 5, right? Don't focus on your favorite topics at the expense of your weaker ones. My whole career was in the bond markets, fixed income markets. I felt that I was fairly comfortable in the bond topics, so I leaned a little more during my preparation into equities, into alternatives. I spent a huge amount of time on ethics, but I am a CPA, so I was a CPA, certified public accountant, before I took the chartered financial analyst thing, so I was really comfortable with the accounting section. Okay, and that allowed me to spend more time on some of these other sections where I was less confident. I was even a little less confident on the quant section. The key here is that you need to assess where you're confident, where you need a little more help in. Now, clearly, if you're using the Fitch portal and you're doing lots of questions, particularly if you're doing random questions, the Fitch portal will help you track your progress, and you will know very quickly what areas you need to improve on and what areas you could feel reasonably confident that you could be okay on the day. If you really like doing equity questions or capital budgeting questions, you feel like you're really good at those, maybe de-emphasize those a bit during your study and work on areas where you feel less confident. Tip number 6, extremely important. It's going to change for levels 2 and for levels 3, but for level 1, let's make sure we know the allocation of topics across the exam areas. Like I said, we're going to go through this, right? Accounting is a big piece of it. Right now, let's look down the list, right? So the list, according to our friends at the CFA Institute, right? Ethics is 15% off the bat. So we have to dedicate at least 15% of our time to answering questions on ethics. This is the one area where I think it really benefits to have ethics questions in your question set across all your study sessions. Make sure ethics is always tested. Some of the questions could be quite challenging. I think here at Fitch we have a nice little tool to help you understand how to answer those ethics questions, but it's extremely important. The second thing is, for the CFA Institute, investment tools are almost 50% of the exam. This is the tools of our chosen profession. How do we analyze securities? How do we analyze markets? How do we analyze companies? Well, they want us to be comfortable with quant methods, economics, both micro and macro, financial reporting and analysis or accounting, and some corporate finance. Of the 50% or almost 50%, accounting is a huge number, right? If there are 240 questions, right, 20% of 240, there will be 48 questions on accounting. Clearly, it's going to be difficult to pass level 1 if we're not comfortable with accounting. If you are comfortable with it, good for you. If you're not, we'll spend some time with you to make sure that you do get comfortable. Ethics 15%, 49% is investment tools, right? And then the rest of it is products, okay? So ethics, how do we behave ethically in our industry? It's obviously extremely important. It's always been important, but perhaps never more so today. So the CFA takes this extremely importantly, so, which means you should as well. Now they're saying, okay, understand the tools of our profession. Okay, we will. We'll go through that. Now understand the products of our profession. Well, the products are generally equity products, fixed income products, derivatives, obviously a ginormous part of the market, maybe tested a little more heavily in level 2 than in level 1, and something here that's growing in importance, alternative investments. So that's the exam. How to behave in our industry, what are the tools of our industry, what are the products of our industry. And then there is a small part at the end, but this part will grow for levels 2 and 3. But this is basically saying, how do we apply what we've learned about our ethics? How do we apply what we've learned about the tools? And how do we apply what we've learned about the products? It makes sense. But clearly, if you're starting off and saying, okay, I know nothing about the CFA exam, where do I need to work? Well, I would say initially it would be a good idea to spend some time on accounting. It would be a very good idea to spend some time on ethics and then move ahead. Okay? Do not underestimate ethics, right? Ethics will be tested in level 1, in level 2, in level 3. So what I tell students is that if you invest heavily in the ethics session at level 1, you could build on it to make your studying for level 2 and a level 3 a little more easy. Okay, so it's not a throwaway. The ethics questions tend to be given both in the morning and the afternoon session. We've been through that already, but I can't emphasize enough how important this area is. This is one area where I think it's absolutely critical, is you have to read the Code of Ethics. Right? Now, this is not a textbook. This is not a 1,000-page textbook. Okay, this is something that you absolutely have to read, and the key points of it has to be committed to memory. The key to answering the questions on the ethics session is to look at the question and to map each question back to a particular section in the Code of Ethics. Okay, that is really the trick, because sometimes you will be given a question where you think the ethics is asking about loyalty to your employer, but what the question is really asking you is perhaps maybe about insider information. So when you're going through the question, the key point is you got to take the question and say, okay, I need to map this back to the particular area in the Code of Ethics. Okay? Do not overlook the CFA curriculum books. I think they're excellent. I really do. And I'm pretty sure, although I'm not 100%, when you sign up for the exam, you have the ability to get the CFA books. They're both online, or you could get the printed material. I regularly now find myself consulting these CFA books, both in my preparation as an instructor and also as a practitioner in the financial markets. They are an invaluable resource, not only just for exam preparation, but as your careers mature and you get further along in your careers. And they have an excellent test bank as well. I don't think their test bank is online, but if you have and order the printed materials, you could see the questions that the CFA are using to illustrate key points and key learning outcome statements. The best part of these questions, in my opinion, is that the answers are extremely detailed, and they will help you understand the core concepts and the core points about the learning outcome statements. So now we have another source. So we have the CFA curriculum that's got a lot of very good Q&A. We got Fitch Learning that has a lot of good Q&A. We've already said the way to prepare for this exam is to do lots and lots of questions, and now you have lots and lots of good resources. And again, even today, I find myself going back to these books, Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3, in my practice because they are so handy and provide great information. Okay? Seems like an obvious one. I had this question yesterday from a student. I wasn't able to answer the question because I'm not sure. When I took the exam, you had to use a pencil, right? I'm not sure if you're allowed a pen in the room as well. Some of this seems like it's a bit obviously, but just make sure you understand the test center's policies with regard to pencils, erasers, what the required form of ID is, a passport or a driver's license or something else, which calculators are approved and which calculators you're allowed to bring in. Remember, they may check your calculator, so make sure you walk into the room with a cleared memory. Don't try anything where you're trying to save certain formulas in the memory to recall them a later date. It won't work and it's unethical. Absolutely don't do that. Make sure, I've seen some candidates that didn't exactly know where the exam center was and they left it too late. So make sure you know where it is. The CFA Institute recommends, and I did this myself when I was in London, I went to the test center a week before the actual exam, so I knew exactly where it was, I knew exactly which train to take, knew exactly what exit to get out of, because you're stressed enough on yourself. Someone has written in, where can you find examples of ethics questions? Well, if you go to the CFA portal for Fitch Learning, there are example questions for potential candidates. You could definitely get a good sense of the types of ethics questions that will be asked on the Level I exam. There are plenty of resources at Fitch and plenty of resources on the CFA Institute themselves. I don't think the CFA Institute will allow you to view the curriculum books unless you enroll in the exam, but I'm sure that they provide a couple of example questions. We also have a question like, does Fitch offer exam simulations? Excuse me. It's an excellent question. For each level, level 1, 2, and 3, we hold what's called mock exams. Okay, so we will test you. We will do a full test, a full 6-hour test under exam conditions, where a few weeks before the scheduled exam, you come into one of Fitch's offices in London or Dubai or New York or some other convenient location. You could perhaps do it online as well. I'm not sure about that, but we simulate actual exams. So for level 1, you will get a 240 question exam that covers the questions in the exact same weights as the CFA recommends, and it will be graded, and you will get feedback on where you scored well and where you need to improve. I did these myself when I was studying, and I felt much, much more comfortable when I walked into the actual exam room, that I know what it was like to sit down for a 6-hour exam. Okay, if you're still a student and you're used to taking exams, maybe you don't need to know what that environment feels like again because you're in it. But if you've been out of school for a few years like I was, it definitely helped me to absolutely do the mock exams. The mock exams get very, very challenging as you go through them. There are more than one mock exams per each level, and some of them for level 2 and level 3 are extremely challenging. So it's a great question. Thank you for the question. Okay, keep your energy up during the last few days. I think this is a personal choice, and it depends on how you study, right? For me personally, as I said, I spread out my exam preparation over a long period of time. So as I actually approached the exam, I didn't really change anything. I kept doing, 20 to 50 questions each day, tried to go over areas where I felt weak. What I did not do was stay up the 3 or 4 nights before the exam and try and cram in everything. Now, absolutely, I understand that some people feel comfortable doing that. I don't. I think for me it was much better to spread this out. But for some people, if you're going to stay up and cram the night before, just be aware that sitting in an exam room for 6 hours, even if you're a young person, can be challenging, right? You're not allowed snacks in the room. I think you're allowed a bottle of water. You do absolutely get a lunch break so you could refuel and get going again. But don't underestimate how stress before the exam can impact before the exam. We have another question. Does the CFA Institute provide scrap paper to do some calculations on during the exam? I have not sat in the exam in a couple of years, but when I took the exam, scratch paper was absolutely provided. So you could use your pencil, you could use your eraser, you could work off to the side on the exam question. There was plenty of scrap paper. When I did it, it was in a little book, so you could do your calculations. At the end of the exam, you had to hand in the scrap paper because clearly the Institute doesn't want people sort of writing down questions to look at them later or to discuss the questions with people that may take the exam at a later date. So for me, there was absolutely ample resources to write down questions on the side. Clearly for the mock exams, we would do the same. Okay, so to maximize your chance for CFA success, What I'm saying is we're here to help you. If you make the commitment, we make the commitment. We want you to pass level 1, level 2, and level 3 in the time frame that's right for you. It's not that unusual where some people pass level 1, pass level 2, and then maybe take a year off before attempting level 3. It's really up to you. We will be here for the entire journey. Okay, what CFA preparation services we offer? We have review classes. Like I said, I'm an instructor. I'm an instructor both online and in class. We have global locations, London, New York, Toronto, Dubai. If you're not near one of those classes, perhaps an online class would suit. We have home study that has lots and lots of questions. Fitch has this thing, a portal that tracks your progress, tracks how many questions you've done, your success with individual questions, what areas you need to work on. As we get closer and closer to the exam, we offer online review kits where we go through certain types of topics that people may be struggling a bit with. We give this final countdown guide, which essentially is our way of saying to you, these are the absolute critical pieces that you need to know before walking into the exam, right? We're doing obviously mock exams, review summaries, and all of this. So there are plenty of resources here at Fitch Learning. We've been doing this for an extremely long period of time, and our success is really only a function of your success. Okay, I'm getting also another question. When I took the exam, it was not computer-based. Okay, so it was like an old school form where you had to take your pencil and fill in the answers question by question. Okay, I have not been in an exam site recently. It may be computer-based now. It may depend on the exam site as well. But for me, it was filling in those little oval circles question by question. And I spent a lot of time at the end making sure that, one, every circle was filled in, that I answered every question, and I did have a little time at the end, and I had marked the sort of questions that I thought I should review if I had time at the end. Okay, if you need any help, we are here. We have people here in the US, we have people in the Middle East, we have people in Asia, and of course we have people in Europe. Right? One thing that I think is very good about Fitch is our instructors generally are full-time. That means that people like myself and my colleagues in Europe and Asia and the Middle East invest a lot of time in your success. We are also a sister company of Fitch Ratings Group, of the Fitch Ratings Group. So the instructors have a lot of resources at our disposal to look at issues, look at topical things that may come up on the exam. So we're always trying, pride ourselves in staying current with the market. So we're part of a much larger group here at Fitch Learning. We're part of Fitch Group. We have access to lots of resources. And again, okay, this question, I'm getting a question, is there a specific program you must be enrolled in, online learning or classroom learning, in order to get the refund? So Fitch Learning, which you could find out about the policy, does offer a reimbursement if you follow our recommended plan and you do all the requirements, that we would rebate the tuition if you were not successful at level 1. I am not sure if that applies both online and instructor-led. So please use some of these phone numbers, and I'm sure those people in each of the regions will be able to answer the questions. I'm not sure. We also had somebody writing that said basically the exam is paper-based. Okay, so it's not computer-based, it's filling in the little ovals, just like I've been doing for the last 30 years of my life. I'll hang on for a couple more minutes to see if there are any more questions. I appreciate everyone that is stuck with us here. I again applaud you for the effort of thinking about obtaining the charter. The charter is extremely valuable, but just like everything in life that's valuable, it's going to require some tough work to get through. We're here to help you. If you make the commitment, you could be assured that our commitment is behind you. Yeah, I think someone else has written in here that I think is a good exam strategy, given that each question is equally weighted. And that's a big point to remember. Each question is equally weighted. It almost makes more sense to pass or spend less time on the tougher questions and more time on the easier questions, right? I think that's a very, very personal decision. At the end of the day, what we have to do is maximize the number of correct answers. So for some people, that strategy, it could be an excellent strategy. So if you see something, it looks a little tough, have a go, but if the answer doesn't come right away, move on. Use your time more effectively. It's a very personal choice. What I tried to do is I tried to use my time in a linear fashion. I was very particular about spending approximately 90 seconds on each question, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best strategy for you. So it's a very, very good point. I'll hang on 1 or 2 more minutes here if there are any more questions. Again, let me just go back to the beginning. I just want to say my name is Edward. You could get my email if you call in. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. Personally, I just want to reemphasize that I had extreme success once I became, a CFA charter holder. It helped me enormously in my career. My whole career pretty much was at Morgan Stanley, and it very much benefited me. Yeah, so a person is asking about the pass rates. The pass rates generally, it's public information, so you could go back and look at the pass rates for each of the levels. I think for level 1, the pass rate, tends to be, I guess 40 to 50%, somewhere in there, and it varies. Again, you could look online what the pass rates are. But what this essentially is saying is that if the pass rates are stable, let's say they're stable at 48%, the CFA Institute obviously is in charge of grading, right? We can't help with the grading. But if their approach is to keep the pass rate stable, say around 48%, that simply means that they are grading on a curve, right? The number of correct answers required to pass will basically be a function of keeping the pass rate at around 48%. Okay, but the CFA Institute themselves are responsible for okay. I think if the pass rate is, I'm guessing here. I would say if there were 240 questions, this is just me. I'm just asked what I think the pass rate is, right? Now I'm guessing. I clearly do not have information on the CFA Institute, but I would guess of the 240, you need to get a minimum 80% correct. That's me guessing. Okay, this is up to the CFA guys, but I think you should be targeting on your exam preparation of scoring between 80 and 90%. I think if you're way below 80, you need to get it up to at least 80. If you're between 80 and 90%, you should try and focus on getting it above 90%. Okay, so again, thank you everybody for joining me. It's a wonderful mission. and journey that you guys are thinking about embarking on. The work will be hard, but I can personally attest that the rewards are there if you put in the hard work. If you trust us, we will help you to move through all 3 levels as quickly and efficiently as possible. Thank you again for joining. I wish each and every one of you the best of luck on the exam and with your careers. Thank you.